Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Artificial intelligence. From the world of science fiction to a fixture in our daily lives. The AI boom has been called the greatest technological revolution since mankind split the atom. And with that kind of power and money comes politics. Every developed economy on Earth is looking to cash in on the race to develop the latest and greatest artificial intelligence. It's an arms race. And whatever nation comes out on top will unlock economic power the likes of which have not been seen since the Industrial Revolution. National security, human rights, and the rules-based world order all hang in the balance. In President Joe Biden's farewell speech last week, he warned the American people of an emerging technology oligarchy and the rise of the tech-industrial complex. Some people think the development of AI should be heavily regulated, brought under government control. Others disagree. President Donald Trump has pledged to make America first in AI. He wants America to dominate the AI economy and all of the power and influence that go along with it. This week, Trump made his first major announcement of his second term in the White House. $500 billion to accelerate the development of artificial intelligence in the U.S. I'm David Smith. Today on The Big Story, how will the global race to control the power of artificial intelligence shape Donald Trump's second term as president? And how does Canada fit into the puzzle? Joining me today is Don Lenihan. Don is an expert in public engagement with a long-standing focus on how digital technologies are transforming society and government. He is CEO of Middle Ground Policy Research and the author of a weekly column on AI for National News Watch. Hi, Don. Thank you for taking the time.
Greetings, David. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So let's start with the newest news first. Donald Trump has announced a $500 billion AI infrastructure project. It's a joint venture, public-private partnership called Stargate. What do you make of this announcement?
Well, I guess in a word, wow. It's big. It's very big. And maybe I'll just take a step back and say this. I don't know if your listeners would know this or not, but actually Stargate was announced about 7 months ago. And at that time, it was OpenAI and Microsoft, and it was $100 billion, at which time I said, wow. Now it's $500 billion, and a number of players, a large joint venture, as you said, with a few basic ones. I noticed Microsoft has kind of moved into the background. But it is, I think, a turning point, not only for AI, it's probably a turning point in history and for the world.
Okay, so it is a significant announcement then. This is not just, a political show. In your opinion, having watched this develop, because I do understand there was some funding announced in a previous iteration of this, and this seems to be a continuation of it. This is significant. This is a big announcement in the world of AI, right?
It's very big. I mean, you have to look very hard in history to find an infrastructure project that's even close to this big. Even if you go back, for example, to the Apollo space program, in current dollars, it would have been about $250 billion. I think the only project I could find that was the same size was the Interstate Highway Program, which was larger. And we're looking through history. You probably have to go back to the pyramids, and even they, I don't think, would be of this scale. It is huge. And I think what's very significant about it, it's always possible this thing somehow falls apart, but if it does, other things will come up. I would say a couple of things. First of all, what it really shows is that investors are confident that AI has reached a level of maturity, and they are confident in where it's going and what the future technology looks like. That they not only recognize there's a return coming, but that they're gearing up already for implementation. Like, this infrastructure is certainly a big part of it is dedicated to further development of the technology. but a big part of it will be towards implementation and application of the technology. And I think that's where we begin to really turn the corner, because up until now, AI has been a lot of talk, and it gets sort of used. I mean, it's allegedly used in all kinds of projects, but we haven't had that iPhone moment yet where all of a sudden the technology is really and truly in everybody's hands, and we're using it face to face for all kinds of things. And we're not far from that, and that will be a turning point for the world.
Okay. So let's talk about Donald Trump's presidency and how it intersects with the world of AI development. In your column for National Newswatch this week, you write, quote, "If Trump has fixated on AI oligarchs, it's not just because they're rich. He needs their help to deliver his mega agenda," end quote. Who are the AI oligarchs, and how has Donald Trump been courting them?
Yeah, if I could say, just to start this off, I should say always amused. I've been a bit amused because all of the commentary in the media has been around how Donald Trump is enamored with these people's wealth. He is. I'm not going to deny that. And personally, I don't care. But I think that misses the point. The eight CEOs of all of the biggest AI companies sitting out there during the inauguration, and by his invitation, we were all focused on the fact that they paid $1 million to get there. That's true, but I think Donald Trump needs them, increasingly recognizes he needs them as much as they need him. There is a kind of match here. And I can say a few things about that. I mean, and first of all, when I'm talking about the oligarchs, we're looking at the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world. If you look at the list of the, I think, 8 biggest companies right now in the world, starting with changes day to day, but it could be NVIDIA or Microsoft or Google. These are like I can't even get my numbers right, $3 trillion companies. And all of the 8 biggest companies in the world right now are all very invested in AI and are all big tech companies. It's not an accident. These guys are all sitting out there at the inauguration speech. And it's not just that they're there to get favors. They certainly are. They're there because there's a project emerging, a very big project, and they realize they need government, and increasingly Donald Trump realizes he needs them. Let me just give you a few things. First of all, from their point of view, I would say this is Donald Trump hasn't courted them. They have courted him. I don't think he's a genius on AI. I don't think he cares about it all that much. What he cares about is his own agenda. And I think what they have convinced him of increasingly is that his agenda requires and is hugely enabled by AI. And we're not, from their point of view, they require from him deregulation, right? You'll notice that Donald Trump has already essentially canceled Joe Biden's initiative, and all the things that he put around it, including his official declaration. But the economic opportunity is huge here. And I think increasingly what Trump recognizes is that in order to make America great again, if that's what his goal is, he needs something to drive growth and development. And the thing that's on the table right now, the timing for him is very good, is AI at a point where it's really developing and ready to go. And there's huge dollars behind it. Those dollars will be invested to create new infrastructure and develop new global markets and new products. And he can latch onto that, and they can latch onto him. And it's in some ways a very good fit for each other.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the technology itself. As you point out, the industry is poised right now on the precipice of a new round of development, you could say. I think by now, Don, most people are familiar with generative AI. ChatGPT was the big first one that came out, launched November 22. Since then, we've seen AI creep into many aspects of everyday life, mostly in the form of chatbots. But a new frontier is on the horizon. It's called, I believe, AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. What is that, and how will it shape the AI industry?
So I think that is the place where we are. I would say AGI, artificial general intelligence, is imminent. It's not here yet, but it's very close. And I'll take a minute to explain to your listeners what it is. I hope they'll be patient, but I'll try to make this as simple and accessible as I can.
Please, yep.
But it's worth listening. Everybody needs to know this, where we are. with artificial intelligence. First of all, I would say artificial general intelligence is it's about problem solving. And I want to give you a very simple little story here, what kind of problem solving we're talking about. I have a little dog, and I walk my dog outside all the time. And when she has her leash on, if she goes around a tree, essentially, she will never figure out that her leash is she'll never back up around the tree. She doesn't know how to get out of that. All she has to do is turn around and walk back around the tree. And for all my little dog's ability to do all kinds of really interesting things, that never occurs to her. I always have to go and unwind her from the tree, and that's just one time around it. What's going on there? What's going on is that she has a huge amount of information and knowledge stored in her brain from when her ancestors were out there in the wild. And they never wore leashes in the wild, so they never got caught up around trees the way that she will now with her leash. So all the knowledge that she has is a bunch of systemized knowledge in her brain. It's coded in there, and it tells her how to navigate around the world very well unless she has a leash on, because that was never part of her experience. And she doesn't have the wherewithal to suddenly look at the leash and say, gee, if I just went the other way, I would untangle myself. If you look at a chatbot is a lot like my little dog. We pour into it huge amounts of data. We give it a memory that goes back millions of years like my little dog's. It's comparable. But the way it works is just a bunch of memories about things the chatbot can plug into. What the chatbot cannot do, just like my little dog, is it can see patterns in the memories that we put into its system, but it can't compare them and reflect on them and get some new knowledge out of them the way you and I can. It doesn't figure things out. What AGI is it's a whole new step in artificial intelligence where there's not just vast amount of data and memories that recognize patterns. It's an ability for the machine itself to step back and look at those patterns and compare them and begin to draw new information out of them. It's the power to think, to reason. And we have that power now. We are over that lump, and it is growing very quickly. And we're leaving my poor little dog way behind because she doesn't have that. And she will never have it. But now AGI will be the emerging power to do that reasoning. And we're still in the early stages, but we have crossed that threshold, and we're going to, in the next few years, see it skyrocket. I'm going to go one step further here and say only a year ago, we have the language of the next step after AGI, and that was artificial superintelligence. So AGI is smart, reflective, intelligent AI that can make assessments and learn new things. Artificial superintelligence is that capacity with incredible knowledge. And that already, we thought that would be 10 years down the road only a year ago. We are now talking about it regularly as though it may be 2 or 3 years away. So we're not only moving to AGI, where we have intelligent machines that can figure things out and do things in the world that it couldn't do before, but where it will have intelligence we can't even understand. And that is coming, folks.
Wow. So to put it maybe in more layman's terms, we are progressing faster than people thought we would toward replicating human intelligence in an artificial form. This technology will be able to solve problems. You can give it a task and it will be able to independently figure out how to do that task rather than having to be taught how to do that task?
Yes, let me give you one example of what will very likely start happening this year, and they'll progress very quickly. It's what we call agents. Right now, AI, if you go on your chatbot and talk to it, and even your reasoning AI, it can say all sorts of things. It can't reach out into the world, use your credit card, and solve a task for you. If you ask your AI, your chatbot, to go out and buy you a pair of shoes, and you told them I'd like them to be brown and size 10, and you know my tastes, so get me something I like. It couldn't do that. It couldn't reason through that yet, although we're getting there. But very soon, probably this year, we will start to see emerging very quickly. The chatbots will be connected to the real world, and they will go out and do things that are complicated tasks that require them to reason through situations like, I wonder if he will like these shoes. I wonder if he can get a better deal at this store rather than that store. So it will have to work through a whole bunch of things on its own to solve a problem and achieve a task. And that is starting to happen now. Over the next year or two, it will start to happen in very significant ways.
A few moments ago, you mentioned government regulation and how the Biden administration's philosophy towards artificial intelligence differs from what Donald Trump's administration's positioning is, at least for the moment. Can you speak to that a little bit, please? What is the role of government when it comes to this rapidly expanding AI development and the associated economic benefits or possible economic harms that go along with it?
So this is a great question. And again, I'm just going to take a little bit of time to explain to your listeners where we are, because we're at a really critical and potentially very dangerous point. There's a tension here right now between the Trump folks on the one hand, and let's just say one wing of artificial intelligence, and another. There is a difference of opinion, and it signals, you can see it in the difference between Trump and Biden. One side is much more concerned with safety, and safety here takes a variety of forms. Excuse me. For example, if we don't want terrorists to be able to go online and figure out how to invent a new biological weapon. That's not good for you. That's not good for me. So one of the things we want to be sure of is that if we're going to put access to intelligent machines out there that can do all kinds of things for us, we don't want them to tell people how to invent new biological weapons. Or how about this? We've heard of cyber attacks, right? But we don't want people to be able to use AI in order to break through encryption and essentially start to break into our bank accounts and all sorts of other things. So there are a lot of concerns around safety, and there's a whole question even of rogue AI. We have now incontrovertible evidence that AI will do things and it will hide it from us. It will actually deceive us about things it's doing. And by the way, I'm a fan, right? But we know that now. We know that it literally will lie to us in order to do certain things. And I won't go down that path now, but I would just say this is a big concern is, are we sure we have control of the technology before we put it out there into the world and give it your credit card? And we're about to do that. The other side of the coin is I would just sort of say it's the concern over losing the AI arms race. We have a huge competitor out there, and it's China. China is moving very quickly with this stuff. We used to think only a couple of months ago it was a year behind the United States. There's now evidence it's almost caught up, if not caught up with Silicon Valley. And the concern is that China will not only dominate the markets before we will, we being the Americans, I don't know if it's Canadian or not, but before the West does, and that it will essentially benefit from those markets and essentially become the world's next economic superpower. And that given its ideological views, it may use AI in ways that essentially thwart and control not only its own citizens, but potentially geopolitically other countries around the world, such as the United States or Canada. So there's a big concern right now, certainly among the Trump folks, that they must win that race with China. They need to get to artificial general intelligence before China does, and that the world's security and opportunity and prosperity depends on it, because if China gets there first, we will lose out. So they are increasingly willing, I would say, to they would be much less concerned about the safety concerns than they are about beating China. And that means they are investing heavily and quickly, and hence back to Stargate. Stargate is a sign that these people, by these people, I mean the great big technology companies, are, I'm not saying they're ignoring safety, but they certainly aren't as concerned with it as some people are. So right now, I would say the real challenge for governments around the world is how much are we balancing safety, the safety considerations, effectively with our geopolitical concerns over China? That's the big debate at that level.
And from what we know right now, Donald Trump seems to be erring on the side of less regulation rather than more regulation in order to achieve his desired outcome, which is to make America first in AI, right?
That's absolutely right. And the people around him are very, I would say, they're very candid about this. Not only candid, they are deeply committed and believe that the Biden folks, for example, in Biden's executive order that this has now been canceled by Trump, that it over-regulated the industry, and that as a result, it was holding the industry back from innovation and development. And the announcement of this $500 billion initiative right after, 2 days after Trump's swearing in, is a sign by the industry at large that they certainly favor the kind of regulation, which is a lot less regulation, that they're going to get from Trump. And Trump himself said that when he announced the project. He said, "I'm going to declare emergencies. I'm here to help this happen. Basically, I'm getting the red tape out of the way." Now, if you're really concerned about safety, you're probably not very happy about that. On the other hand, if you're really concerned about China and the opportunities for the future, you're probably very happy about that. It's a tough question, but it's something we should all be aware of, because this is not small stuff. This is very, very big.
Yeah, let's talk about the downside risk here. How do the worlds of artificial intelligence and national security intersect? If China wins the arms race, what happens?
Well, I don't know. It depends who you talk to. I would go back to what I would say. The argument of those who are concerned, those who are, for example, rallied around Trump, the oligarchs, if you like, and I would say Silicon Valley, by the way, even people on the left are largely partial to this view. They want deregulation. They see China as the real competitor, and they think that this is ideologically important because China will use this technology to not only to exploit markets, but to control geopolitics and other countries and ultimately undermine democracy. That is their argument. They think we need to do this to defend democracy and ultimately prosperity. I'm not saying whether I believe that's true or not. I think there's a case to be made. All I would say is that there is the other side of the coin, and on the other side of the coin are the concerns over security, right? The concerns over such things as cyber attacks and public safety and rogue AI and even new military technology. These people are certainly very supportive. Not only supportive, the Trump wing sees the military as a really important part of this partnership and the development of essentially new technology, military technology, to ensure that the American military remains in advance of all other ones is a big part of the agenda. And I think we're going to see him announce very shortly something he sort of alluded to. I don't know how many of your listeners would remember during the Reagan era. Reagan tried to create what he called Star Wars, which was some sort of satellite-based defense system. And Trump has talked about this and indicated that it's coming. And that even the Iron Dome that they have in Israel, he compared it to the Iron Dome, and it would be very heavily technology-driven. So I think that in terms of national security, these are all concerns that are on people's minds, and they will be moving forward on that.
Okay. All right, let's bring it back down to earth a little bit now. Let's talk about the actual real-world economics of artificial intelligence. It's described as an infrastructure announcement, this $500 billion AI project. Some people may be thinking, well, artificial intelligence is all inside the computer. What kind of infrastructure is involved in that? It doesn't need roads. It doesn't need bridges. It's a computer. As I understand it, it's all really has to do with data centers. Can you speak a little bit about how data centers and the ability of America to construct and to power new data centers fits into this equation?
One that's absolutely critical is, what we do know is that the amount of what we call compute, that is just to say that the capacity to crunch the data, right? You not only need three things to do AI. You need huge amounts of data, you need the right algorithms, and you need what we call compute. That is just to say the power to crunch the data and organize it and process it. And the amount of data and compute that new artificial intelligence systems take is massive. That's why they're spending so much money. If you look at one of these data centers, is that right now, one of the data chips, we call them chips, they're not like the chips that are actually in your computer. These things are like a small shoebox and they are incredibly powerful. Is one of these computer chips can process like 10 million pages in a second. I'm not making that up. 10 million pages in a second. And there, Elon's Musk's center, which is currently the biggest in the world, has 200,000 of those chips in it in one center. And the ones that they announced that they're building in Texas for the Stargate project are going to be even massively bigger. So just think about that. One of those chips can process 10 million pages of text in a second. There are 200,000 of those chips in Elon Musk's center, and the Stargate project will be even bigger. So this gives you some idea of how much data has to be crunched in order to create the kind of intelligence that we're talking about. And that's doing at least two different things. One of the things it's doing is it's training and teaching and building the machine. It's developing new AI. The other thing it's going to do is deliver that capacity in the form of products and services around the world. So it's infrastructure because it's both building the product and delivering the products that will be developed out of that new AI, those new AIs, those new systems that are developed. And the scale of this is just awesome. I can't tell you why it's that way. All we know is that to create this kind of intelligence, at least as we understand it now, it takes that kind of power. These centers are so big and demand so much electricity and water that they are now building, connected to these data centers, their own nuclear plants. The ones in Texas that they talked about the other day will literally have their own nuclear plants with them.
So, when it comes to the Trump presidency and the issue that's been gripping all of Canada and dominating the news cycle, how do we respond to Trump's tariff threats? National unity has already been strained by these discussions. Is there a possibility that the tremendous economic potential of this AI revolution, hundreds of thousands of new jobs, could play a role in Trump's economic nationalism and his trade policy?
Yeah, I think, as everyone wisely says, no one knows what's in Trump's head. Right? So all we can do is speculate here. And I think there's a few things going on with the whole idea, particularly with respect to someone like Canada and the use of tariffs and so on. On the one hand, and he's been candid about all this. We should notice if we listen to him, he changes his story all the time. That's not necessarily because he's inconsistent. It just means I think he sees that his story, for example, about tariffs, has various different sides to it, and he's focusing on different things at different times. For example, tariffs are a revenue source, right? If he actually slaps a 25% tariff on Canadian imported goods, the Canada-American trading relationship is the biggest in the world. We would be a huge cash cow for him. Now, that money's coming from his own people, but he obviously doesn't care about that. He will get massive revenues from that, and he will need massive revenues to fund his tax cuts and other things. So I think one of the things he's after is just a revenue source. How long he will be prepared to do that, I don't know. But I think there's other things too. There is political leverage. He knows that we are very vulnerable and that tariffs are like a great big stick or a club that he can hit us with, and we will respond because we're in no position not to. So if he threatens to slap a 25% tariff on all of our imports, that means Canada will react and do what he wants very quickly as long as we can. If he wants us to stop fentanyl getting across the border, we'll find a way. If he wants us to beef up border security so that fewer people are crossing the border, even if few are already, we will do it. So I think that's another thing. He just wants political leverage, and he's using it. But I think the big thing here, and I think this is where the Silicon Valley folks have, I don't know how to should say educated him, but convinced him. I don't think Trump thought, even 4 years ago when he was still president, I don't think any of us thought that the AI revolution was going to be this big, this fast. I think what he sees now as a big political guy is the world around us, geopolitics is about to change. It's shifting very quickly. And there are huge opportunities to make America great again in ways he could hardly imagine 4 years ago. He can now imagine not only creating massive jobs by essentially dominating whole new global markets, he can begin to think about essentially the boundaries in the world shifting and look at somewhere like Canada and say, maybe I can get it, right? Maybe it should join. Remember what he said when Putin first invaded Russia? He said, brilliant move, right? Wasn't so brilliant after all, but he was quite open to the idea that Russia should be able to absorb Ukraine as part of its territory. I'm sure he'd be quite happy if he could absorb Canada or parts of Canada as a way of making America great again in a new world, which is dominated by the AI economy, a new global economy, and where America is leading that charge. So I think to go back to your thing about jobs, it's not just jobs, it's truly opportunity on a massive new scale. And he sees himself right at the sort of juncture of history where there's an opportunity to be the guy who does that. I don't know, and he doesn't know how far, how fast this will go, but I think his willingness to use tariffs now as a club, not just to get money out of his own people, but to begin talking about whether musing about Canada joining the States and repeatedly sort of visiting that issue, well, I think he's testing the waters. I think he'd be quite happy to break Canada up and take some of the parts if he could. And he probably will push that. And that's part of the current plan, the evolving plan to make America great again.
Wow. All right. Watch this space, I guess, Don. Good advice for the listeners. Keep up with the news about AI and artificial general intelligence if you can, because it sounds like this is going to be one of the things shaping our world over the next number of years and decades.
And artificial superintelligence
As
yet
well.
to come.
Yeah. All right. Don, your column, where can listeners find your column if they'd like to read more from you?
They will find it on National News Watch, which is a site. Just type in National News Watch and you'll find it on Google or elsewhere. And it's up there. You can type in my name and all of my columns are stored there quite conveniently. And it comes out once a week, usually on Tuesday. So please, readers, have a look.
Don Lenihan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you as our guest on The Big Story today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
And again, that is Don Lenihan, CEO, Middle Ground Policy Research, and you can find his column again at nationalnewswatch.ca. That's all for the Big Story podcast today. Thank you so much for listening. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode. Email us hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave us a voicemail 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Please rate, review, follow, and share. I'm David Smith. Until next time, thank you for listening.